All right, guys, hold on tight. I'm going to show you how to derive the quadratic equation by completing the square. So let's start by looking at a quadratic in standard form. I've got x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, I want to go from that to this. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's the quadratic equation. I get there by completing the square. So let's rewrite that quadratic in standard form. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, let's start the process of completing the square. Remember, in our last lesson, I told you that this term needs to be 1. So in order to make this term 1, I can divide everything by a, and that'll get rid of anything that's in front of x squared, okay? So I'm going to divide everything by a, and that's going to get rid of everything, anything in front of x squared. So I got x squared plus b over ax plus c over a equals 0. All right, so we don't know what these letters represent, what numbers they represent, so we can't assume that it's a perfect square trinomial. So like we would in any other case where it's not a perfect square trinomial, we're going to go ahead and move this term over to the other side so we can then replace it with the term that completes the square. Okay, guys? So it's going to become x squared plus b over ax equals negative c over a. All right. Now we need to find the term that completes our squared. Remember, we take this term right here, divide it by 2, and square it. So we're going to take the b over a, divide it by 2, and then we're going to square that. Okay, guys? Before we square it, let's simplify. If I've got b over a divided by 2. So remember, I could write that as 2 over 1. And here we've got a fraction divided by a fraction. And remember, whenever you do that, you multiply by the reciprocal, 1 over 2. So that's going to be b over 2a. And then remember, we're going to square that. So that's actually the term that completes your square. That's what's going to go here. And then you're also going to have to add it over here to this side. Okay, guys? So let's go on to the next slide. And we're going to add that to both sides of our equation before we factor our perfect square trinomial, okay? So we're going to have x squared plus b over ax, and then I'm going to add that term that completed my square, b over 2a squared, and I'm going to set that equal to negative c over a, and remember, I've got to add the term that completes my square to that side as well, and that would be the b over 2a squared. All right, so what we can do now, we can simplify a little bit more. I can have x squared plus b over ax plus b over a squared, b over 2a squared, sorry, equals negative c over a plus, I can distribute this power of 2 to every term over here. So that becomes b squared over 4a squared. Okay? So now we're getting a little bit closer. Let's go ahead and see if we can combine these two terms together by finding a common denominator. Okay? So here I've got 4a squared. Here I've got a. So if I multiply negative c over a top and bottom by 4a, I would have a common denominator of 4a squared. That would become negative 4ac over 4a squared, okay? So I can rewrite the negative c over a as negative 4ac over 4a squared, and I can add that to b squared over 4a squared, because now they have a common denominator that I can use to combine like terms. Okay, guys? So now we got x squared plus b over ax plus b over 2a squared equals, and if I combine these two terms over here, let's do the positive term first. I've got b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Okay? All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and factor this perfect square trinomial over here now that we've created it. Remember, we take the square root of this term, we take the square root of that term, and use whatever sign is in front of the middle term, okay? So it's going to become, in here, it's a positive that's in front of there, okay, guys? So we're going to say it's x plus the square root of b over 2a squared is just b over 2a, and then remember, that's a perfect square trinomial, so we're going to put it in parentheses and square it. And then we're going to set that equal to b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. All right? So what we're going to do now is I'm going to rewrite this on our next slide, and we're going to continue to finish the process of deriving this quadratic formula, okay? So if I look at my next one, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite what I had on that last one. I've got x plus b over 2a squared equals b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. Now comes the part where we take the square root of both sides. I take the square root of this side, and I take the square root of that side. Now remember, I've got to do a plus or minus on this side. So plus or minus, and I can go ahead and write this as b squared minus 4ac, the square root of that, over the square root of 4a squared. All right? And that equals, on this side over here, if I take the square root of x plus b over 2a squared, that's just going to be x plus b over 2a. All right? Let's continue simplifying here. So on this side, I've got x plus b over 2a. And then on this side, I've got plus or minus on the top. I've got b squared minus 4ac. And then on bottom, the square root of 4a squared is just going to be 2a. Okay? So now what I can do is, I'm down to my last couple of steps here. I can subtract b over 2a from both sides to get x by itself. Okay, so that goes away. So I got x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay, well, I've got a common denominator there, so I can actually combine this into one. So I can say x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. There you go, guys. That's how you derive the quadratic equation by completing the square. And there's actually a song that you can use to memorize this. It goes to the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel. It's x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, hope you enjoyed that, guys. Have a great day.